Hi, it's Pat here, and today I'm in my studio preparing wood panels to mount some works on paper. So I like to mount my works on paper on wood. I find it's easier than on canvas. But before I actually start the mounting process, I like to finish the edges with a clear varnish. I don't normally paint the edges, but it could be done. But I like to protect them so that if any glue drips over, nothing gets on the edge, or if it does, it can be wiped off easily with this finish. So these are just raw birch panels that have this return on them, and I'm going to be using a water-based polyurethane by Deft, but you could also use one by Minwax, or there's other brands, I'm sure. So you want to start with a wet brush, or you can use a roller too. I just didn't happen to have one on hand. So this is a Purdy's paintbrush from the hardware store or the home improvement store. I decant my polyurethane into a container so that it's a little bit easier to work with. I can hold on to it as I'm working. The other thing I like to do is prop up my panel on a couple of gallon pails here so that I have it, if any drips, it drips down onto my drop cloth rather than sticking to the table. So it just makes it a little easier to handle. So I usually put a couple of coats on, sanding in between, and then I'm ready to start preparing the top of the panel for the work on paper. So start with a wet paintbrush so it doesn't absorb a whole bunch of this in to the dry brush, and easy enough to paint on. You want to make sure that you load your brush up, and might want to have to hold this down. And we just want to lay off that excess. I'm getting a few bubbles here. Hopefully they just dissipate on their own. Okay, and I'm going to come around and do this front edge. So this is very thin, and it looks yellow, but it does dry clear. You can see there it's dripping a bit. So I don't have a table that I can walk around, but if you did, it would be very easy to finish. I'm going to have to just turn this so I can get the other edge. Do this back edge first. And this is a waterborne product, so it dries pretty quickly. Again, put your hand on top so you can keep it steady there. Okay, so I'm getting a few drips. Now, if you miss some on the first go around, don't worry about it. On the second coat that you give it, you'll catch any of those misses, and it'll be just fine. So I'm going to let that dry, and I'll give it another coat with a sand in between, and then on the next part I will show you how I prep the top part and mount the work on paper. Okay, so now we're ready to seal the top. So I like to seal it before I glue it, just to be safe, so that none of the acids from the wood do come up through into the painting. Now, it's not likely that that's going to happen with having a layer of glue in between, but I just like to take the precaution. So a couple of things you can use. One is GAC 100, which is just Golden's acrylic polymer, and it's very thin. That's going to seal your surface. So the other thing that you could use is the Bullseye 123 primer by Zinsser. Now this is white, and it is a less expensive option that you can get at the hardware, and it works great as well. So I just have a little bit of the GAC 100 in here, and my nozzle is plugged, it seems, so I'm going to go ahead and just spill some out on here. And again, you could use a brush or a roller for this. I'm just going to use this brush. And it's easy enough to see on the panel because it does turn it a darker color as you're working. So I'm going to have to get a bit more out, I think. So it doesn't have to be a thick coat. All we're trying to do is seal the surface so that it doesn't leach any acids from the wood into our painting. This will also make the glue be a little bit less absorbent as you're putting the glue on, so it's not going to sink down into the surface of the panel like it would just being a raw birch. And for this, I just do the one coat, and then it's going to dry quickly, and I'll be able to go on to the next stage of mounting. Again, when you finish this, it's important to clean your brush really well because this is polymer. It is like glue, and it will definitely wreck your brush if it dries on there. So get it in water right away. So there, I'm going to just leave that and let it dry. I'm now ready to start mounting the painting onto the panel. So this is the painting that I'm going to be mounting, and I am using Yes paste for this. You could use gel medium as well, that works, but I like to use the Yes paste. So it's a stick flat glue, and it is super, super thick. So I don't like using it as thick as it comes out of the container. So what I do is add a little bit of water to it to make it into a thinner paste, and I use a scraper to put it on. So I got quite a bit of paint on the back side of my painting somehow. I'm going to use my silicone scraper to put the paint on, and I'm going to put a thin layer on the painting and on the substrate. Now you want to be sure that you get paint into your corners. We want enough paste that it's covered, but not so much that it's going to squeeze out all over the place, like I have it right now drifting. Here, get that up. corners and the edges. You want to make sure that you've got the glue on the edge, because that is the part, if it's going to lift, it's going to be the edge. Set this aside and do the substrate. So the same method holds true here, just a thin coat. Want to have any lumps and bumps, so for some reason I had a bit of dried stuff here. Bit mist on the edge here, just when I see the light. Okay, so baby wipes also come in handy to just wipe any excess glue that has dripped on the edge. So got a bit there. So now I'm ready to put the painting on the substrate. So this is 18 by 24, exactly the same size as my panel. So I have to be very careful that I get it lined up. There might be a little bit of wiggle room, but not too much. So what we want to do is work from the center out, and I'm going to put a piece of plastic on top. This is just plastic from the hardware store that paint won't stick to, and I'm going to start to just press from the center, kind of like putting wallpaper. And I can see away from the edge here. So with the Yes Paste, you have a little bit of time to move it around. And I'm going to take the brayer and a softer one and just start rolling this. Really want to get it married to that background, so the two two parts of glue are coming together. And we want to also squeeze out any excess glue or air bubbles. So you can go around and feel with your hands as well. And I can tell there's a little bit of a pocket there. A little bit of excess glue. I suggest when you're going to start doing this that you start with a smaller piece and maybe something that's not as precious to you, just in case it doesn't work out as well as you'd like, until you get the hang of it. Here that there's some air pocket under here. Turn it around. Take a look on this side. Make sure everything is to the edge. Over a little bit, but it's good on this bottom. So you may have to do just a slight trim there. You can see it's just slightly over on the top part. So that all looks good. This painting hasn't been varnished yet, so just want to make sure that there's no glue residue sitting on the edge there. So now, I just want to get that down slightly. Yeah, so like I said, there's a little bit of time to move this and make sure it's perfect. So now what I want you to do, you can use freezer paper or parchment, anything that won't stick to the painting. So I'm just going to put a piece of plastic on there. Happy with that. And I'm going to put a board on it as well. So this is just a board that I could paint on, a piece of hardboard. Now you want to weight it down, so I'm going to use some gallons, and this is why you want the board on top so that you don't leave an imprint on your painting. You could use books for this. Big bags of rice will work as well. And you want to be sure you weight the four corners. And we'll leave this overnight. Come back tomorrow and trim it. Do any touch-ups that are necessary. And sign and varnish it. Well, it's the next morning now, and it's time to take a look and see how this worked. So I'm going to take off the gallons. And the board. Plastic. It looks good. The corners are down nice. And there is a little bit of trimming to do here on this edge. And then I usually give the corners a bit of a light sanding. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next. Okay, so now for the next part. I'm going to trim that little bit of excess on the edge, and I have my Olfa self-healing mat, and it is quite dirty, so I have put a piece of freezer paper down just in case. And what you want to be sure is that you have a super sharp blade, like a new blade. Otherwise, you're just going to be tearing the paper. And I like to have it out quite a ways so the little screw doesn't interfere with the panel if I'm cutting that way. Today I'm going to cut this way just so that you can see, but normally I cut the other way. So you just want to put the blade in along the against the cradled panel, and you can score along at first and then come back and give it some pressure. And you just do that all along where you have that little bit of excess. Okay, so now I'm just going to take a look at this now that it's trimmed. You can see on the top edge that it's not absolutely perfectly straight along there. So I am just going to use a sanding sponge just from the paint store and smooth the edges. And I like to take down the corners just a little bit because often that's where the damage happens. So I just like to kind of soften those corners, make them a little bit rounded, and then just take my sanding sponge along the edges. So this is really fine sandpaper, and just smoothing that out. There, that's looking pretty good. A little more in this corner. Yeah, so I just continue to just go around and do the corners a bit, and there you can see it needs a bit more in that one place. Okay, so now you can see that it's nice and straight along the edge and smooth. So the next step is to, after you sand, is to put on a barrier layer of gel medium, soft gel, gloss, gloss medium, and varnish, whatever you like, before you actually apply a varnish to it. So that's the next thing, and then finally is putting the hardware on the back, and of course the whole process of making sure that you have documented your art. So you might ask, why would I go to all this trouble to paint on paper and mount, opposed to painting directly on the board? And there's two reasons for that. One is storage is an issue, so I find I can paint a lot on paper, and by keeping the size consistent, I like this 18 by 24 size, which is a Strathmore mixed media panel, because it's standard and it fits perfectly on these panels. It works great for either a landscape in the landscape format, or the portrait in the portrait vertical format, so portrait or figurative. So I find it works good. I find it's a nice size. It's affordable for people, and the galleries like it. So usually I offer this two ways: one as a work on paper, but also as a mounted piece. So I have lots and lots and lots of works on paper, and if they don't turn out, I haven't wasted a panel, and I offer them to the galleries as a mounted piece. So when they decide on the works they want, I then go ahead and mount them up so they're ready for them to present. So same with entering shows, I do the very same thing. So stay tuned. I'll make another whole video on varnishing and adding the hardware. Thanks so much for joining in, and I hope this was helpful for you. Please leave any of your comments in the comments, and if you have questions or there's other things you would like to have a video on, please let me know. I'd be happy to share my knowledge with you. Bye for now.